Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good coffee break. My name is Eric, and I represent OceanBase in APAC. Today, I will have the pleasure of speaking with you on the next generation database technology that is powering Alipay. So let me do a quick introduction of OceanBase. So we are the original developer of OceanBase, which is a high-performance, scalable, distributed database. We are currently the #1 database on MongoDB DB ranking, and we serve more than 400 customers globally, and we power Alipay in all its mission-critical workload. So we are the only database that have refreshed the TPCC as well as TPCH benchmark record, and we handled 61 million QPS during Double 11 for Alipay system. So today we will talk about how do we do that. Some other interesting facts would be #1, we help companies to reduce their TCO by reducing the storage that they have to use to power their database by as much as 70 to 90%. #2, we are a multi-tenanted database. So what it means is that we can consolidate hundreds of instances into a single cluster, which makes your operation and maintenance much easier. We have an RTO of less than 8 seconds in our latest version, generation 4. Gentlemen and ladies, if you see outside in the video later, we actually have a video to demonstrate how do we handle a situation where a node goes down and how it goes back up within 8 seconds. We serve more than 400 customers globally, and some of the leaders include ICBC Bank, Gcash, Dana, and of course the most popular e-wallet in the world, Alipay. So we have been 13 years in the making. It started originally as a problem within Taobao and Alipay in 2010. So the problem statement was, how do we scale to be able to cope with a massive e-commerce and transaction sale, and yet at the same time, right, be able to keep the cost of maintaining database down. So that was the original problem statement. And as with all interesting technology, right, your internal customers are the most challenging one. I think everybody can attest to that. And throughout the few years, we have reiterated our technology. And in 2019, OceanBase became an independent entity, and we started to serve external customers, which you will see here, China Mobile, and as well as ICBC. And in this region, we have the earlier names that I mentioned, as well as EasyPasa in Pakistan. So for people who do not know Alipay, Alipay is a super app. Inside, you will see many microservices, which includes your food ordering, ride-hailing, your insurance, even your weather, your hotel booking, so on and so forth, and of course, your microfinance and embedded finance system. So you can imagine the massive amount of transactions that they need to handle. And some interesting figures would be, so this gentleman, Chris Skinner, actually reported that Visa handles a maximum transaction peaked at 64,000 transactions per second. But Alipay handles 544,000 TPS. So this is about close to 9x more. So how did Alipay do that? So the challenge overcoming 61 million query per second and 500,000 of transactions per second. So the first thing is the database needs to be elastic in scaling. Second, it has to have city-level lossless disaster recovery. Third, it has to be very resilient to be able to handle the network impact. Fourth, it has to handle hot roll concurrent updates problems. So I'm sure everybody understands that when there's something, there's a flash sale happening in China, right? There will be hundreds of thousands trying to call that single line of data. How do you handle this hot roll? 5, how do you handle database throttling when your application couldn't handle it anymore? Analytical SQL in online transaction processing. And how do you limit the blast radius damage when a part of the system goes down? And lastly, how do you maintain this massive database cluster with as minimal manpower as possible? So we have the autonomous service included. So double 11, 61 million QPS, 500,000 TPS. So these are big numbers, right? So today we will talk about a few interesting implementation that we did in order to cope with this kind of massive workload. So the first question that people typically will ask me is, how do we scale the infrastructure? So number one, OceanBase was designed originally as a distributed database. And what this means is that we have near infinite capability of scaling our database. So in normal day operation, Alipay actually distribute their workload across 3 IDC, on-prem IDC, to handle your day-to-day transaction workload. However, everybody can imagine, right, the sudden calling during Double 11. This would mean that the infrastructure needs to scale. And how did Alipay do that? So we scale it via cloud. And in this model, this is a hybrid cloud database that, implementation. So you can see that in the IDC 2, 3, 5, 7, these are all spread across in your cloud servers. Right? So that is the first thing that we did, is to allow the ability for the database to scale via cloud. And we are a platform-agnostic database. So this is done by a single line of command. Right? Prior to the Double 11 festive season, all the DBA needs to do is to enter this single line of command, and the distribution can be done seamlessly. Next would be to address the problem of hot promotion, where maybe you have a single item, and that single item is going at a massive discount. How do you handle that particular row's data workload? So we call this a hot row concurrent updating problem. And we devised a methodology to do this called ELR. It stands for Early Log Release. This is also a research paper that we have published. And how do we do this? Basically, we change the sequencing of how we release the log in this data. And we reduce the locking time and increases the system throughput by more than 500 times. And this greatly improves the cross-region transaction performance and also guaranteed zero data loss, right? Because we write the transaction in batches, and we release the log in batches. So if any of the transaction fail, right, we will redo the whole batch. This helps to have zero data loss, but yet at the same time increase the throughput. And the next unique thing about the Alipay architecture would be the unitization and multi-active architecture. So in this architecture, right, there are 3 unique zones. Number one, this is the regional zone. The regional zone basically handles what we call the microservices application layer. The global zone is where we handle your stateless, stateful data, which is your accounts and customer information. And your city zone is purely a mirror replica of your global zone, but it allows the remote reading of this data. So with this architecture, right, it helps to handle billion levels of accounts, and yet ability to handle the high concurrency in querying of this database. Some of the benefits of this architecture is, number one, it has extremely high availability and DR capabilities. So even if one IDC were to fail or 2 IDC were to fail, it will immediately be able to spill over to the other IDC and to quickly power up the database. Number 2, the resiliency is extremely high. We limit the blast radius of this to less than 1% of the data. And number 3, because we have made this a very flexible architecture, you can switch traffic at a 1% granularity. This is one of the very unique part about how we handle this massive workload. So in OceanBase, there's 20,000, in Alipay, there's 20,000 nodes, hundreds of clusters, and mind you, right, each cluster can hold hundreds of instances. So how do we handle this amount of workload with just 10 DBA? So there's only 10 database administrator in Alipay system. So this is the part where we have our OceanBase autonomous system. So with a combination of expert rules as well as machine learning, what we have transformed, right, is the ability for us to recognize errors, it giving a prompt or suggestion on what are the events, and this allow the DBA to either manually intervene or to let the system actually do an intervention. So this is something that we have developed, and we will also gradually release this capability in our future edition. So in summary, if I were to end this session today, right, is that the world of database is no longer a monolithic one. With the availability of cloud, with the availability of multi-region on-prem infrastructure, application as well as database needs to modernize. And in order to do that, you need to have a partner that allows you to scale infinitely and at the same time handle massive workload. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time. I would like to urge you to also to download our ebook, which will discuss in depth about the architecture behind Alipay. And we will discuss more about the technicalities in our booth as well. So feel free to visit us at our booth later. Thank you very much. Yeah.